Good day. Welcome to the American Security Council Foundation Peace Through Strength podcast. I'm Laurence Sanford, Senior Analyst with the American Security Council, and with me today is Captain Carl Cramb, retired from the United States Navy, U.S. Navy Academy grad, served in the surface fleet of the United States, as opposed to, say, the submarine service or flight part of the Navy. And he served in the Second Fleet, and he was a commander of a destroyer squadron. So he was a Commodore in the Navy. And here today we're going to talk about the American Security Council Foundation, Peace Through Strength, and our programs of education on national security issues, social leadership, moral leadership, and economic security. And the similarities, Carl is president of the Navy League in Cape Canaveral here in Florida. And their mission is to educate and engage citizens on aspects of the Navy League, and in particular, helping youth sea cadets and other seafaring organizations such as the Maritime Institute of the Navy League, Coast Guard, Marines, and of course the Merchant Marine. So with me today, welcome, Carl.
Thank you.
Glad you're here.
Glad to be here.
So let's start off by saying, why don't you just describe the Navy League's mission?
Okay, yeah, the Navy League itself was started in the early 1900s by then President Teddy Roosevelt at a time when the U.S. was in the Industrial Revolution. We were at the point of developing the Great White Fleet, which was getting ready to go out and do its thing and circumnavigate the globe. And Teddy Roosevelt, who had been an assistant secretary of the Navy, understood the importance of making sure that the American populace understood the importance of having a strong Navy, especially with the advent of such a large amount of commerce that was going to be taking place. So, making sure the sea lines of communication were free and that the world understood that not only were we going to be out there on the high seas distributing that commerce, but we had the might to back it up in the event something untoward would happen. So the Navy League came into being with three main principles at the time to educate, advocate, and support our mission areas. Back then, it was probably focused on the first two of educate and advocate, which is to educate, just like your foundation does, the American population, especially on the coastlines where all the commerce was going to be taking place, on the importance of having a strong Navy. So once they understood that, then they could in turn advocate to the congressmen and senators and let them know that, hey, it's important that we fund this Navy that's in its formative stages here with the Great White Fleet to be a premier global power when it comes to the Navy. And so that was kind of the focal point at that period of time. And then we, as time progressed, we added the element of support, because support in the communities is critical. It's not just educating and advocating, which is a key element, but it's also to support those individuals that are tomorrow's leaders, if you will, and that's our youth through the various programs that we have. The Navy League has the Sea Cadet program, which is pretty vibrant in northern Brevard County with 28 members in the Courageous Division. And then we also support our junior ROTC programs in the Navy and the Marine Corps, of which there are 3 of those in the Brevard County area. So, and then the other piece that's important to understand is that when Teddy Roosevelt started the Navy League, it was the Navy. And as time transpired, we have since broadened that mission to not only educate, advocate, and support the Navy itself, but also the sea services. So we also support the Marine Corps, of which is an arm of the Department of the Navy, and the Coast Guard, and our merchant mariners. So here in Brevard County, we have a pretty strong element of three of those four. We have the Naval Ordnance Test Unit over in northern Brevard County, over at the Space Force Base, which does a lot of the, is responsible for doing a lot of the testing with regard to our ballistic missile submariners. And then we have the Coast Guard Station itself, and we have two medium Coast Guard cutters, the Alert and Vigilant, which we support. And then there's the Marine Safety Unit, co-located with the Coast Guard Station, which supports the movements within Port Canaveral, specifically the submarines coming and going, the SpaceX program with respect to clearing the waters to make sure when the boosters come down and land, which I'm sure everybody's seen, but you got to clear the water space to make sure that that's done safely and then get them back into port. And then also the movement of all of our cruise ships coming and going, which is a major player in the port there. So we support, all of those folks locally. We educate and advocate the community. We advocate with our congressmen here locally. And the other thing that's important is when it comes to advocating, educating, we have a relatively new organization nationally. It's called the Center for Maritime Strategies up in the Arlington headquarters, Arlington, Virginia, which is run by retired Admiral Fogo, who does a lot of analytics with respect to the budget every year for all of the services to make sure that we understand where the shortfalls are, and to advocate on the Hill to make sure that they understand where all those shortfalls are and where we need additional funds to have the strong maritime service that we need to make things happen around the globe.
So Carl, if segue into that thing about the strong maritime presence, increased budgets to build more ships, but the timeline on starting today to have a significant impact is years out. I mean, to build shipyards, to train men and women to do the necessary work. I mean, is that the way we have to go? Or one of the suggestions, and I must say I advocate for it, is developing alliances with nations that are building ships now so that we can sort of ramp up the acquisition and deployment of additional Navy-going ships. For example, South Korea and Germany and Japan, they're all significant shipbuilders, and some of them have excellent destroyers and diesel-electric submarines that we could perhaps incorporate into our services.
Yeah, that's been a problem of making for quite a while, I think. If you look back to World War II and our ability to build ships in short order, it was quite a different problem back then because ships were not as technically advanced as they are today. Our ships were a lot easier to build as a result of that. And we were able to energize a workforce throughout the country, especially in the area of trades, which were so important. Today, the ability of our country to pull together all those tradesmen that are necessary to build the ships in the numbers that we need is a difficult problem. We have some tremendous shipyards in the country that are capable of doing just about anything, but we have some significant labor shortages, and we don't have the numbers of shipyards that we used to have. So an option is to look at shipyards outside of the U.S. to do that. There's a significant issue, I think, with respect to security elements with regard to that, to make sure that they're done in a way that we can still maintain national security, the security of the equipment and so forth that's going on to it. Yet we have shown an ability to take weapon systems from around the world and put them on our vessels and so forth. So it's not a simple problem, and it also goes beyond just the Navy itself. It also goes into the merchant force. If you look at the number of merchant ships that were in the U.S. Or flagged as U.S. vessels, as far back as World War II, it was close to 50% of the vessels were U.S. flagged. Today, I think it's less than 15%, might even be lower than that. Yeah. So it's a much bigger problem for us. We need to increase the trade capability within our shipyards to be able to do that. Sending everything overseas there's a short-term win, if you will, by doing it that way. But is it from a strategic perspective the right way to do it? And bringing that workforce or increasing that workforce and being able to do things like we used to within the United States is going to bring a lot of jobs back to the communities here in our country. They're good-paying jobs, and so we need a process that is a long-term vision that's going to, I think, ultimately bring that capacity back to the U.S. But in the short term, if we can do it overseas, I think that's a process we're going to have to look at. But it's again, strategically and from a national perspective, security perspective, are we doing it the right way so as not to lose that security element with respect to our equipment and so forth?
Yeah, well, I'm all for building up American shipyards. What I'm saying is it's going to take years to do that, whereas we don't have the time. So until we start putting money and time and investments into the Americans thing, if we want to build up the fleet, then we have to go to our allies.
True. I think the other thing too is the types of vessels, though. I mean, when we look at our the Arleigh Burke class destroyers, the capabilities that I don't think we really, when we first built them, we knew we had quite a vessel, but it has been able to replace cruisers that we thought maybe were irreplaceable, and take on a lot of the capacity and capabilities that others, especially with ballistic missiles and things of that nature. So that class of ship is pretty impressive. What we need is a class of ship that is capable of replacing it well into the future. Although we could use the Arleigh Burkes for quite some time.
Were you a Commodore for a squadron of Arleigh Burkes?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And then, but the other one is the Constellation class that is, they're in the process now of framing up and getting ready to deliver in the next couple of years. That should be an impressive, capable ship too. So, but I agree with you. The problem is numbers. When we look to our combatant commanders and what they need on a day-to-day basis in each of their theaters, it's not an easy question because they do not have the capacity of units that they need to actually meet all the requirements that are out there.
Well, of course, one of the big issues nowadays is, and maybe the Ukraine-Russian war is a sign of the future, that with missiles, ships are pretty easy to sink if you have the right missiles.
Mm-hmm.
And the Russian fleet, for example, has had to withdraw from the Ukraine theater pretty much because of Ukrainian drones and missiles taking them out. And so that carries over to the concept of, if China invades Taiwan, can we take out their fleet? And if America comes to the rescue of Taiwan with our fleet, can they take out our fleet as they're coming into the Taiwan Straits and Western Pacific?
Yeah, there's the ultimate question, right? You know,
Yes.
Who's our main competitor these days? And China is obviously, from a pure numbers game, probably in capability, our largest adversary at the moment.
Yes.
And but you also have to take into account the aspect of Russia and North Korea, and to some degree Iran, all working together with China, making that problem even more difficult around the globe. So
Yes.
yeah, we need, and the Chinese have shown the capacity and capability to steal a lot of technology, specifically our technology, and turn it around pretty quick and start building things to make that problem even much more difficult. The one thing that I will say is that they don't have the people that we do, and that is a force multiplier that many people don't account for. But our people are extremely well trained and knowledgeable and capable of doing, I think, much more than the Chinese or others. But when you look at pure numbers, it starts to become an issue. And so I think that is the largest problem for the U.S. Navy, is just numbers of vessels that we can put out there, not only for peacetime, but also wartime type environment. So like you said, building the vessels now to get the numbers up is critical. And like also, as you indicated, we don't have the trades and the shipyards and the other things to get there in an easy fashion. So we've got to look elsewhere. But I think the other piece to that is we have to have a long-term vision that gets back to a national perspective, that we have the ability in the event of war to be able to build the things that we need to. It's not as easy as it was, I think, in World War II,
No.
because the technology
Much
was
more.
so much different, and we don't have the tradespeople just sitting around with the knowledge and the capacity, because technically it's so much more difficult to build an aircraft or to build a ship or submarine for that matter. So building up that capacity and that capability is critical. And I think far too many people don't put the time and effort into looking at that and how we're going to improve that capacity in the U.S.
The missiles, I keep on going back to the missiles, and you go back to the Falkland War, for example, with Britain, and so do the ships have the defensive mechanisms to overcome if 100 missiles are coming at them? Probably not. So what do you do when 100 missiles are coming at an aircraft carrier that can take it down?
Well, one of the things that we look at is defense in depth. So when we don't send an aircraft carrier out by itself.
Right.
You've got all the aircraft that are embarked, and you also have various surface combatants with them who have a lot of capacity and a lot of capability. So we run scenarios, we look at the problem set, and at some point you can be overwhelmed with anything, but we have within a strike group significant capability to defend against a large volume such as you described. So I'm not as concerned about the threat to one carrier. I'm more concerned about the larger perspective of saturation of capabilities. You know, we're out there talking multiple carriers, and you know, when you look at China, the numbers that they're getting to the point where they can put out there the volume, it's significant. So sometimes it's just a numbers game.
Yeah.
But right now, I think we are more than capable.
Speaking of numbers and submarines, the U.S. Navy submarine force is exclusively nuclear powered. Roughly 60 nuclear subs are in the service, somewhere around there. And the price of one nuclear sub is somewhere in the range of $4 to $5 billion for one nuclear sub. You can buy 10 diesel electric subs for the price of one nuclear sub. And with the current technologies of diesel electric, they're not as good as a nuclear sub as far as longevity and so forth, but they're pretty close and they run pretty quietly, and they can certainly be a force multiplier. If we went out and bought maybe 10 or 20 of them from Sweden or Korea or Japan, that would add to our capabilities vis-a-vis the numbers is concerned.
True. I think that our capabilities within the submarine force are pretty significant, and you know, there's always the question between whether you want a nuclear or you want the non-nuclear type submarine, but and you could throw numbers at the problem. But given the numbers that we do have and the capabilities that exist within those platforms, I think we're in a pretty good situation. However, it's just like anything that we've been talking about. The Chinese have shown a capacity. You know, when you look at the number of dollars they're spending in regards to their GDP and so forth, their ability to produce platforms and do things are significant. So again, it's that numbers game. It's the cost. Do we have the dollars? Do people understand the risks involved? And you know, to a certain extent, we have the capacity to build a lot of submarines here in the United States. So it's you know, from a risk perspective, are we where we need to be? I'd say we are right now, but you know, that's something that needs to be looked at too. I think the bigger consideration or issue here is the surface force.
Okay. And of course it takes money, and everybody's talking about the motto of American Security Council is peace through strength, and that's the current phrase you hear bantered around now. But it takes money. And the budget that Trump is proposing in inflation era dollars is less than before. And so I don't see Congress, I don't see the American people on board with significant increases in defense spending, considering we're in $37 trillion in debt, and there's all sorts of social pressures and social programs that are on sort of on automatic payment schedules. So we have a significant cultural problem here in the United States. Do you see any solution or any suggestions as to how we can increase a more effective military spending? I mean,
well, I think one of the concerns is making sure that people understand the threat, you know, the issue, and I think a lot of people, you know, if you look back to the 80s when Reagan was building up the military, when this organization was a cornerstone of getting us through the Cold War, we had just come out of a period of 3 wars between World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. We were just moving into the all-volunteer force. We had a lot of people who understood the military, not only in the civilian population, but also within Congress. So the importance of all of these things was not missed by many people. I think they understood it. There was just a the question of prioritization and where to put the dollars and so forth. And the cost of things were maybe not as significant as they are today. So then you shift culturally to a period of time now where we have less people serving in the military, we have less people understanding the global situation and climate, and important for organizations like yours, even ours for that matter, to make the case for those stronger budgets and to increase the spending where needed. And so a lot of times this isn't a time for like pet rocks or whatever, but it's a time to put the money into building those surface platforms and to get our weapon systems out there as much as possible. So I think it's a knowledge piece is part of it, and making sure that our congressional representatives truly understand the importance of these budgets. And it's not just it's not sometimes just what the president proposes, but it's things that aren't being funded, and making sure that they look at all of that stuff too. So, and then when you consider the debt and trying to reduce the debt problem that we have as a result of it, we can't cut corners and we can't cut the military spending. And if we do that, we will, the peacetime military becomes more of a problem towards the future too.
You touched briefly on the fact that we were switching towards the all-volunteer military force. Do you have any thoughts on the all-volunteer military versus the draft era type of military? Should we institute some sort of a draft program, or would it be good for the culture of the United States if more people participated in the military?
Yeah, I think, some form of service, I think, would be good for everybody. I think there's a lot of studies that were done post-draft period, pros and cons, and in many cases you tend to use drafts when it's a wartime environment because you need the bodies and so forth. But I think, some countries like Israel, where they require some form of military service or if not military, some civilian service, whatever it may be, where you're doing something within the government structure, so you get an understanding of how the government operates, the military operates, and the impact that has across the globe is really important. And I think far too many people, they don't appreciate it. They don't understand. It builds an element of nationalism. You become very tied to the country. You understand while our country is not perfect, it is much better than many of the countries that are out there. So we need to, my personal opinion would be to go back to some type of situation where people serve, a year or two at a minimum, so that they gain an understanding of that.
There's pros and cons to that, that's for sure. And usually it's the countries that are in the greatest danger. Israel, I think Sweden and Finland are pretty big on reserve organizations. So you can have reserve organizations, and you develop a camaraderie and friendships that last a lifetime. And that's part of our culture, and our culture has changed, and I think in a negative fashion as far as viewing the United States as the shining city on the hill. And we could spend the next few hours talking about what's happened there, but I think we have to start looking at our culture, the culture of the United States, who we are, and what we want to be, as opposed to what's going on right now as far as rallies in Dearborn, Michigan, where they're yelling "Death to America."
Yeah, exactly.
So we have some real cultural problems in the United States, and I think maybe some kind of government participation by, not all maybe, but certainly the majority of citizens would be good for our culture. So with that, do you have any other final thoughts on how we could help the military and the United States at the same time?
Wow, there's a loaded question. Right? I think organizations like ours, it's important to get out and just truly educate the populace. Let them garner a larger or greater understanding of the importance of peace through strength. There is, I think, if you look through history, our ability to deter large events has been critical when it comes to having a credible military force, and not just in the Navy. So, but part of that is educating the populace, because without people doing that type of government service, they don't truly understand all of it. They're left to the media, and the media today is not. It's not like when I grew up or when you grew up, when there were 3, TV stations, and it was just the facts, right? Everybody's got an opinion now, and so depending on where they're getting their information, determines, in many instances, how they perceive or see things. So it's important that they get both perspectives. They understand the importance of the strength, the importance of having a strong military. If everybody in the world was a good person, you wouldn't have to worry about it. But that's not the case.
We're not angels. No.
But we're not all angels. And there's a lot of people that will sooner do you harm than help you out. So I hope that we can find ways to get that message out, and that's why I appreciate you having me here today.
Well, I appreciate you coming here, and one of my favorite expressions is, and we try to get the message out, and it's sometimes it's a daunting task, yes. But one of my favorite expressions is, it's better to light one candle than to curse the darkness. So we keep on lighting candles and keeping it going. So again, thank you, Carl, and thank you for watching us on American Security Council Foundation's Peace Through Strength podcast. Our website is www.ascf.us. Thank you and have a good day.